What is going on, guys? In today's video I will show you the top 6 most overpowered builds in New World Aeternum that are optimized for both PvE and PvP. Also, as I will cover a lot of builds, so not to spend too much time, for each setup I will give you a quick overview of its playstyle. Then as well I will explain the best skill tree setup, then what gear should you wear, then even how many attributes should you spend for each point, and much more. So then moving over to the first build, which is the sword and the warhammer. This setup focuses on crowd control and using your tankiness to do massive amounts of AoE damage while surviving huge amount of enemy hits. If you use the best skill tree build, then both of these weapons will synergize perfectly to allow for a flurry of abilities that will leave the enemy target staggered, stunned and knocked down over and over again. So as our job will be to prevent the enemy from moving, so then us or our team will be able to finish them off. Of course, we won't be dealing the craziest amount of DPS, but the staggers and massive amount of survivability will be definitely worth the trade-off. So let's take a look at the build. For our gear choice, we will go with the heavy armor, as this will give us the maximum amount of defense and will enable us to use the best shield in the game. Also, since our build's primary objective is to stun and tank, so going full heavy is a no-brainer. Next we have the attributes, and we want to get from 300 to 350 strength. Then 25 focus and 300 constitution. No matter at which level or gear score you currently are, pretty much just split your attributes to half. So put 50 points into strength and 50 in constitution. Next up we have our setup for the sword and shield. This skill tree is more focused on holding the enemy's aggro, increasing our defense and speed, and of course most importantly giving us some of the best defensive tools as well. And then again, this is how it should look like for the warhammer. So then on the other hand, this setup focuses on increasing our AoE damage and locking down your targets. The warhammer has the best AoE potential in the game, and as a tank this is very useful for both PvE and PvP. So if you are interested in the best gear, perks, consumables and everything else, then keep watching until the end of the video. Overall, if you are looking for one of the best and most fun tank builds, then here it is. Next up we have the musket and void gauntlet. This setup's main focus is on melting down enemies with a lot of HP, as you will be doing crazy amount of damage, especially against bosses and heavy armor users. A lot of players really like this build because they can stay at range while doing incredible amount of burst damage, and if an enemy or a mob ever wants to reach you, then you will just melt them in few seconds. So let's take a look at the build. For our gear choice we will go with the light armor, as this will give us the maximum amount of damage while also giving us 2 dodge rolls that we can use to catch or escape an enemy. As our main playstyle revolves around damage from range, so I definitely recommend to go with 1 medium armor and then the rest light equipment. Next we have the attributes, and we should get 350 dexterity, then 200 intelligence and 100 constitution. Since this build always wants to be at max range, so we are mainly concerned with damage over survivability. However, you can even go more extreme and sacrifice all of your constitution for even more DPS. I definitely don't recommend it, but it's an option as well. Then next up we have the skill tree, and this is how it should look like for the musket. These nodes and the overall layout is structured around increasing our damage over time, while also increasing our headshot and overall DPS by more than 2 times. And then again, this is how it should look like for the void gauntlet. This setup is made around removing and buffing the musket's weaknesses, which are locking down your target and armor penetration. So this is where the void gauntlet comes in very handy. If you are interested in the best gear, perks, consumables and everything else, then keep watching until the end of the video. Overall, if you are looking for amazingly fun and high DPS range build, then here you go. Next, let's take a look at another tank build, which is the sword with a spear. This setup has become very popular in the recent updates, as its playstyle is focused on being able to quickly initiate a fight on a single enemy, then put them into a crowd control combination, which then afterwards opens them up for a huge amount of damage opportunity. This build has an amazing survivability, and he can pretty much outrun just about any enemy. So let's take a look at the setup. For our weight we have 2 options, so go full heavy or maybe decide to go with medium armor, as this build has quite a lot of CC and mobility, so you're not required to go full tank. However, I personally recommend to go with the medium armor, as this build has 2 ways of playing it. So be a tank with a high CC, or be a melee bruiser that is super annoying and can do huge amount of DPS. The latter option has higher risk but also higher DPS, and just overall in my opinion is more fun. Next we have the attributes, and we should get 350 strength, 250 dexterity, and 50 intelligence. But if you decide not to go all in on DPS, then you can sacrifice 100 dexterity for 100 constitution. Then next up we have the skill tree, and this is how it should look like for the sword and shield. This layout is focused around high bursts of DPS and survivability, while this is how it should look like for the spear. And this weapon's main focus is on crowd control and locking down the enemy as much as possible. So if you're looking for a super fun and CC oriented build, then here it is. Then for the next build we have the hatchet with the warhammer. This setup focuses on high survivability and high AoV damage as well, as we're using the hatchet with the berserker skill, so we can damage the enemies from a range while also surviving even the toughest bosses if we ever drop below 0 HP. If perhaps you want to be a half tank and half DPS, then this is the perfect setup for you. So for our weight we can again decide to go with the heavy or medium armor. For this setup I personally prefer to go with the full heavy, but as I've said, it is up to you. Next we have the attributes, and as we're going full tank, so we want to get about 300 strength, then 25 in dexterity, intelligence and focus, and then lastly the last 300 in constitution. And again, if you're not at the max level yet, then just simplify this by putting half points into strength and then the other half in constitution. Next let's take a look at the skill tree, and this is how it should look like for the warhammer. So pretty similar like the previous bruiser build, as we're focusing on AoV DPS over armor penetration. And then again, this is how it should look like for the hatchet. So we mainly get the berserk skill and upgrade it, while also not forgetting about getting these 2 debuffs. If you are interested in the best gear, perks, consumables and everything else, then keep watching until the end of the video. And overall, if you want to use a very powerful tank build that pretty much never dies, then this is it. And then for the last and final one, we have the bow with the void gauntlet. This setup is great for dealing damage over time, in big clumps, as most of our skills are built around AoV debuffs, stuns and interrupts. Also, as we are going to be using void gauntlet with the CC skills, so we will need to be relatively close to the enemy, which means not making ourselves very squishy. So then we can go in, lock down the target, then burst him down, and then come back and survive another day. So if this sounds fun, then let's take a look at the setup, and for the weight we want to use the light armor, as this will give us incredible amount of damage, while also giving us 2 dodge rolls, so we can quickly get in and out of fights. Then for the attributes we want to get 25 strength, then from 350 to 400 dexterity, then also 150 intelligence, and finally 100 constitution. As we are using the light armor, so to get some defenses, we for sure want to spend 100 constitution, just in case to be safe. Next, as far as the skill tree goes, this is how it should look like for the bow. So this is built around AoV damage and just burst DPS, so we can quickly melt down large groups of enemies. And then on the other hand, this is how it should look like for the void gauntlet. And this is built around increasing your damage and locking down any target that crosses your path. Just of course remember that you have almost 0 defenses, so using 2 dodge rolls and positioning your character will be quite crucial for your success. And then for the last and final part, let's take a look at the best gear, buffs and consumables that pretty much all builds could use. And remember that this is just an example. So as far as armor goes, of course slowly but surely, you want to get to 275 gear score. And no matter if you choose medium or light armor, always use the Abyssal / War Gem on your gear. And you can try to get some of these perks like the Keen, / Condition and Refreshing. Then as far as your weapon goes, use Opal or Augmentation Gems to convert damage to your highest attribute. But only do this if your second weapon doesn't support your main one. So for example, when you pair musket with the ice gauntlet, the musket doesn't utilize the intelligence, so then you want to use the intelligence converter gem to do more damage based on intelligence. Then next up, let's go over to the consumables, and you want to use the healing potions, regen potions and also mana potions, if for example you're a healer and constantly running out of it. And then lastly, for everyone, you should use any type of food that boosts your attributes even higher. Remember that this is only for 30 minutes, so you need to constantly eat more to keep up the bonuses. And then lastly, don't also forget about using honing stones to get easy from 5 to 10% damage increase. And again, you need to keep reapplying it once in a while, as it also has a timer. And that's about it. So if you enjoyed this video, click like, subscribe and comment. If you are interested in more content, then check out my channel and I will see you in the next one. So take it easy, peace.